Right. So when we're talking about balance, what can happen a lot of times when we have opposite houses, opposite signs in those houses, is we can struggle to figure out what to use. Sometimes it can feel very contradictory. It can feel very confusing. It can feel like you understand this presence, because this is what I'm saying about opposition. You're going to feel it. You're going to feel like that there's two different worlds or two different areas of your life, and you struggle to merge them. And sometimes I think the best way to understand oppositions, if you're still confused, is literally looking at the north node and south node dynamic. So especially this video is for you if you have planets in the ninth and third. Even if you have maybe one of your nodes in one of these houses, and then you have planets and the other node in the other house. So this could be either or. If you have energy in the ninth and the third house and you feel it, this tension. Well, if we want to boil it down really basic, think about third and ninth. The connection between them is going to be something dealing with the mind. Now, the third house is going to be more information, as we know. Let me just give a brief download. I have a whole video, separate videos where I talk specifically about the third and the ninth houses and the planets in those. So if you go to my houses playlist, you can check that out if you want a more in-depth deep dive of those. But the mind, the third house, it's daily stimulation. The ninth, though, is where we go to seek worldly experience. The third house is familiar experiences. The third house is local. It's early life. It's cousins. It's siblings. It is curiosity. It is symbolic of like the earlier stages in our lives. But it also, when we get older, we look at it as our communication style. We look at the types of information we intake. The things we're interested in mentally. The way we communicate can be seen through many ways, but Mercury's placement. But third house is going to be the topics, research, short journeys, short travel is third house. People that sometimes like to go places, third house, but they might not go far. The ninth house is where you do that. So when you look at the ninth house is long-term journeys, which is why it's associated with international travel, foreign lands, different countries. The ninth house is exploration. It's higher learning. It's not the early years like third house. It's travel. It's people outside of your comfort zone, maybe even people outside of your identity, your outside of your ethnic or racial identity. You can see a lot of people there be more interacting or engaging with people who may be different from them, different religions, whatever the case may be. Look at it like this. The ninth house studies life or teaches about life. Ninth house, philosophy. Third house is learning. Third house is informational. Third house is more objective. Okay. And traditionally the ninth house was about religion. Could be one of the many interpretations of the ninth house was religion. Okay. Now you can take that to the modern context about maybe spirituality. Not everybody's religious in the traditional context these days. So here's the thing we want to think about. The issue is how to be successful in your daily life when you have placements in these areas. In the third house, the ninth house is where do I want to go? The third house is how do I impact where I am? And that is where sometimes the tension can come in when you feel a pressure. Sometimes you may need to focus more on that third or that ninth, but you're trying to understand the pressure of it. So when you understand it, it's like the third house is very familiar. Okay, that's why I said cousins and siblings and neighborhood and your neighbors and right? Like that is very where you're familiar. That's where you're going to feel comfortable. And you can be really dominant in here. If you have a lot of placements in the third house, you are someone where you navigate your surroundings very well. Or you know a lot of people, or a lot of people know you, or you're important in some way, shape, or form in those settings. But we think about it though. Let's say someone's a sun in the third house. You get shine off your ideas, off your communication. But let's say you have Sun conjunct South node in that third house, and then you have Jupiter in conjunct North node in that ninth house. Well, yeah, you're always going to be that Sun in the third house person, but you're also here to learn how to expand and reach beyond what you know, right? You have to go on some journeys. It's not just about, being the smartest person in the room. It's going to be about how do you learn from life itself? How do you let journeys and experiences that aren't as clear to you as your third house really guide you and navigate you? That's how a way you can look at it. And I'm just using those placements as examples, right? I would want people to connect the dots themselves for other things. Remember, the ninth house is where you need to explore, but sometimes too much ninth house energy can lead one to being very self-righteous. We talk a lot about this idea of beliefs and this is my belief and this is what I know. And sometimes you can have really strong opinions in this ninth house. If you have Mercury there, if you have someone can be really dominant in terms of like wanting other people to really believe in what they say. That's Pluto, right? Pluto there can sometimes have a very dominant way of like, my belief is the right way. It's just an example there, okay? Saturn sometimes can have limitations in different areas. But when we look here, let's say someone has Mercury in Gemini ninth. Now that's opposite energy. Mercury in Gemini in the astrology order is in the third house. So now it has to operate in the house of beliefs and in journeys. And so person who speaks very freely, using that Gemini energy. But remember, ninth house can be beliefs. And so someone can maybe learn something and then say all of a sudden they know something. That's why I said that self-righteous piece can come in sometimes when you put Mercury in Gemini is not necessarily that. But when you put it in the ninth house of beliefs, now Mercury has to function in a way in which it's expressing and it's teaching and it's still doing the Mercury and Gemini thing. But if Saturn's in Gemini in the third house, you might have to be a little bit more grounded in what you are preaching, what you are practicing, what you are sharing, right? So you may encounter having to balance that out a little bit more. You have strong beliefs, but you also have to focus on an area where you can benefit people in the communities around you, right? So though you may have a lot of ideas and then you may speak freely on certain things, there might be certain areas of your life where you can't really do that as much. Or you realize if you've sat in the third house, you have more of a responsibility when you deal with third house people, third house topics that deal with your third house. So that's what I mean also about this balance idea of sometimes you can look at placements as how do I merge them together? But also instead of merging, I also want to look at it as how do I use energy in a way in which it is beneficial. Where is it beneficial? What areas of my life might this be more beneficial to use this energy versus this energy, right? This balance between third house of learning and the ninth house of teaching. And sometimes if you're teaching, you want to make sure you know what you're doing. And so the ninth house also can mean like, don't have this message and this large, broader understanding and these morals and philosophies and really browbeat people before you've actually done the work. Right? The work is way more. The personal journeys are way more significant in the ninth house than the third house. Let's say you have someone with Mars in ninth and then Venus in third. So your Mars in ninth is more so, how do I act in accordance with my beliefs and my morals? How do I act in a courageous way? Mars in the ninth might be acting on the behalf of other people. You're speaking on the behalf of other people. You are someone who is this is what you believe, and you actually do something with it. You're not just here saying what you believe, you actually do something. You put forth action. But then you have Venus in the third. So now that energy becomes more about how do I relate to the people in my life? How do I create, in this setting that I'm in, how do I communicate? How do I build bridges with them? Especially if you have Venus in retrograde, you might be someone who's relying a lot on that Mars energy, because when you go out and you go on your journeys, you know how to lead and you know how to do things, but then you can sometimes maybe either need to focus a little bit more on that Venus in your third house, or you need to learn and understand a little bit more how that energy needs to behave differently. Now, are there times you might have to be that person, right? To your family, to your friends, to whoever. Yes. I'm not saying that if you have Mars in the ninth house, you can't ever tell people what it is and how it's going to be, right? But I'm saying when you have the different planets there, the themes are going to be different. The ways in which you have to respond are going to be different. And so that's where sometimes people can struggle. It's like you have success in this area of your life. I'm Mars in ninth. I'm I have my convictions. I have my beliefs. I work on the behalf of such and such. This is what I believe in and I act on the behalf of other people. I know what to do. But then Venus in third is like, but with your close people, you're really not supposed to do that. You have Venus there. You need to connect more. You need to build bridges. You need to understand and relate to people more. Okay. And you can make money off better communication because Venus in your third house. But you're operating sometimes too much from that, right? Just like the same inverse, third house Venus or third house moon or something like that, you are operating in a very like diplomatic way with people in your personal life. But when you go out into the world, you have to deal with people who are going to ninth house, you might have people that reject your message. You might have people that reject your belief systems. You might have people that tell you or try to limit you. Why are you traveling there? Why are you going there? Why are you trying to take this excursion? Or why are you trying to do this? Why don't you stay in your comfort zone? And you're going to have to say, care about you, brother, sister, mom, dad, but this is my life and I'm right. So you have to understand the different ways in which this energy can play out. Again, each person's chart is different. To go in depth with your chart, again, that requires a reading. So I can't really give out, like, if you give me a bunch of placements, unfortunately, like the way my brain works, I look at the chart and I connect all the things to your chart. So I can't, throwing a bunch of placements at me doesn't really do much for me to interpret it, if that makes sense. So I always tell people, like, you should, if you are still a place where you're like, I don't get it, or I need to know more, definitely share experiences on the chat, on the yeah, feel free to share a comment. But as far as interpretation, that requires a reading from somebody. Okay. Does not have to necessarily be me. Okay. But when you're dealing with third and ninth house topics, it does become important to also know the things that you have information on. Third house, okay, that's an energy that deals with Mercury, but you don't have to say it all, right? Because the ninth house can be the most important things you want to be known. People with nodes there, if you have South Node in third house, you're going to know a lot of things. You're coming into this world obsessed with information. You're coming to this world knowing how to use information. You're coming into this world being very curious. But when you talk about the ninth house, we now have to stamp the things that we are going to take on as our experience. We want a keyword for ninth house: experience. And so what we sometimes can't do if your South Node is there is everything you know is not important for you to message. Everything you know is not important for you to experience. You really have to drill that down, especially people that have more like an earth-based an earth-based North Node in that ninth house. You're not here to undertake and expand everything. You're here to focus on something in specific to see results if you're an Earth North Node in that ninth house. And just the inverse, your North Node is in the third house, right? You already have done the teaching and the experience. You're here to make an impact in a more local way. And a lot of times people can look at local and third house like, oh, but that's not big enough. No, it's a lot of pressure at the ninth house, because that is where you are showcasing things. That is where you have to take risks and chances. The third house, you have a little bit more control. You can relegate it a little bit more. You can make an impact in a way in which you have more people who maybe like you, people from the same area as you, people from the same neighborhood as you, and you have an impact. It's like the person who everybody knows their nickname. Everybody knows that person around town, right? Everybody knows them. But they're not known through the ninth house. The ninth house might be people who are in the public eye. The ninth house are people people go to them for mentorship. People go to them. But that's a lot of pressure, right? To have a lot of people going to you for advice or for teaching, for, mentorship. That's a lot of pressure at the ninth house. So if you have your North Node and third house, you're not doing that anymore. You can locally find a way to make an impact. So those are different ways in which that can come about. But when you're thinking of what energy to start with this third and ninth house axis, ask yourself, what am I already good at? I already use this energy. I'm really confident about the fact that I have the sun in the ninth house. And right, someone can say that. Or I have Saturn, sun conjunct Saturn in my ninth house. I know exactly what that means. I understand it. I feel it every day. But then I go to my third house and I have this other energy here. I have Jupiter there. And I have the moon there. And I'm just trying to figure out, right? Like that is where you would start. So you want to make sure you study, what does a moon in third house mean? What does Jupiter in the third house mean? You'd want to study and understand that energy. And then you'd want to understand the houses. Because then you see, oh, okay, I need to nurture if I have the moon in third house, I need to nurture the topics of the third house. My curiosity, I need to go learn. I need to make sure that I'm communicating and that I am I am processing things. The ninth house is not a processor. Ninth house is like, I already know what I believe and what I think. So the third house allows for you to process and allows for you to take information and give a greater sense of, authority in a specific thing that you know. Third house can be really great with people who do want to work in any type of setting that is academic or a setting where you have to help people understand how to think. Third house people are great for that. You help other people understand how to think. Ninth house is how to believe and how to experience. So it's looking at your life. Do you have a lot of experience when you are showcasing what you believe and think? Because the ninth house can some people be, you are preaching, you are teaching, you are sharing a message. For some people, the ninth house is you are on excursion. You are a person always out of your comfort zone. You are always traveling. You are always seeking outside of your comfort zone. You want to learn a new language. You want to learn new things, right? But you're doing it outside the world. The third house, I'm learning new things mentally. I'm exploring through research. I'm exploring through books. I'm exploring through talking to people about their opinions and their ideas. But I'm not necessarily telling people what they have to do. I'm showing them ways to think about the information we have. I'm showing them we're learning together. The ninth house, we're outside of our comfort zone. We now have to understand, explore the world. The third house, we're exploring the mind. We're thinking of the whys and why does this happen, right? So really understanding which house you relate to the most And then taking the house that you don't and really doing the research on those planets, on those conjuncts, whatever you have going on there, and really utilizing that energy to really make it come full circle for you.